If you run again, they will find you. And next time, no one will be there to hear you scream. The boy did not stop. His small shoes slapped against the wet pavement as he sprinted across the empty parking lot, breath tearing through his chest in sharp, uneven gasps. Rain poured down in heavy sheets, soaking his thin hoodie, turning it into a second skin that clung to his trembling body. He glanced over his shoulder again, eyes wide, wild, searching for something that refused to disappear. Headlights flickered in the distance, getting closer, too close. His foot slipped on the slick concrete, sending him crashing hard onto his knees. Pain shot through his leg, but he barely felt it. Fear drowned everything else. He scrambled back up, sobbing now, not even sure where he was running anymore, only knowing he could not stop. Not here, not where they could reach him, not where they could drag him back. Before continuing, comment where in the world you're watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you cannot miss. The roar came out of nowhere, deep, thunderous, a sound that did not belong to the quiet, rain-soaked night. The boy froze mid-step, his body locking as the low rumble of a motorcycle engine rolled across the parking lot like distant thunder, closing in. The headlights cut through the rain, bright and blinding, forcing him to raise an arm to shield his face. The bike slowed, then stopped just a few feet away from him, engine idling with a steady, powerful growl. For a moment, everything felt suspended. The rain, the fear, even the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. A large figure stepped off the motorcycle. Tall, broad, wrapped in black leather that glistened under the streetlight. The boy took a step back instinctively, shaking his head, whispering through choked breaths, "No, please, I did not do anything." His voice broke apart as tears streamed down his face, mixing with the rain. The man did not move closer right away. He just stood there, watching, assessing, the kind of stillness that made him seem even more dangerous, the kind of presence that made grown men think twice. And yet, something about the way he tilted his head, the way his shoulders softened just slightly, felt different. Behind them far, across the lot, the headlights returned. Closer now, slower, hunting. The boy saw them too. His breathing hitched, his entire body tensed, ready to run again even though he had nothing left. The man finally spoke, his voice low, steady, cutting through the storm like a blade. "Kid, you keep running like that. You're gonna fall before they even catch you." The boy shook his head harder, backing away, panic rising again. "They're gonna take me back. I cannot go back." His words came out in fragments, broken by fear. The man took one step forward this time. Just one, enough to close the distance slightly, but not enough to trap him. Then he crouched down slowly, bringing himself to the boy level, rain dripping from the edge of his beard, eyes locked onto the child with an intensity that felt impossible to escape. "Hey," he said, softer now. "Look at me." The boy hesitated, just for a second, just long enough for everything to change. The boy's eyes locked onto his, trembling, searching for something he did not know how to name. Rain ran down his face in thin streams, but he did not wipe it away. He just stood there, frozen between running and staying, between fear and something dangerously close to hope. The man held his gaze, unblinking, steady like the engine still rumbling behind him. "They're coming for you," the man said quietly, not as a question, but as a fact. The boy swallowed hard, his small chest rising and falling too fast. He gave a quick, broken nod. I saw something I was not supposed to see," he whispered, voice cracking under the weight of it. His fingers clenched into fists at his sides, shaking. "They said I would not make it out." The man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He shifted slightly, angling his body just enough to place himself between the boy and the approaching headlights, now creeping closer across the lot. The low hum of the engine behind him seemed to deepen, like a warning. "What is your name, kid?" he asked. The boy hesitated, eyes darting past him again, fear spiking. "Ethan," he said finally, barely audible. "Ethan Cole." The man nodded once. "All right, Ethan." He reached up slowly, deliberately, pulling off his gloves, exposing scarred hands that moved with surprising care as he lowered them to his sides instead of reaching out. "My name is Jake. You can call me Razor." Ethan flinched slightly at the nickname, but he did not step back this time. That was new. That was something. The headlights behind them grew brighter, cutting through the rain like blades. A dark vehicle rolled into the edge of the parking lot and slowed, its tires hissing against the wet asphalt. The doors did not open yet. That made it worse. Jake's eyes flicked toward the vehicle for half a second, then back to Ethan. "Listen to me," he said, voice dropping lower, firmer. "You run again, they chase. You fall, they grab you. That is how this ends unless you change it." Ethan's lip trembled. "I do not know what to do." Jake leaned in just a fraction, not enough to invade, just enough to anchor the moment. "You stay behind me." He paused, letting the words settle. "And you trust me." The boy's breathing hitched. Trust. The word felt too big, too heavy, like something he had lost somewhere along the way. Behind them, the vehicle engine cut off. The sudden silence pressed in, thick and heavy. One of the doors opened with a slow, deliberate creak. A figure stepped out, then another. Both moved with the kind of calm that did not belong to ordinary men. No shouting, no rusing, just certainty. Jake rose to his full height now, placing himself fully between Ethan and the men. His shoulders squared, the relaxed posture gone, replaced by something colder, sharper. The kind of presence that changed the air around it. Ethan instinctively stepped closer, his small hand gripping the back of Jake's jacket without even realizing it. The contact was light, almost nothing, but Jake felt it. Something in his chest tightened, something old and buried shifting under the surface. He did not look back. He did not need to. "That is it," Jake said under his breath, just loud enough for the boy to hear. "Stay right there." The men stopped about 20 feet away. Rain rolled off their coats, faces half hidden in shadow. One of them tilted his head slightly, studying Jake, then the boy behind him. A faint smile touched his lips, but it carried no warmth. "You do not want to get involved in this," the man called out, voice calm, almost polite. Jake did not respond right away. He just stood there, unmoving, like a wall that had no intention of breaking. The man took another step forward. "That kid does not belong to you." Jake finally spoke, his voice low, steady, carrying across the rain without effort. "He does now." The words landed hard, final. "No hositashchen." No doubt. Ethan's grip tightened slightly at his back. For the first time since he started running, his breathing began to slow, just a little. Behind him, the motorcycle engine continued to rumble, a steady heartbeat in the storm. In front of him, something far more dangerous than the men approaching had just made a decision. And whatever came next, there was no turning back. The rain kept falling, steady and relentless, drumming against leather, asphalt, and steel as the distance between them closed inch by inch. Jake did not move. Not forward, not back. He stood rooted, solid, as if the ground itself had chosen him to hold the line. Ethan's small fingers tightened in the fabric of his jacket, knuckles pale, breath still uneven but no longer breaking apart. There was something different now. The panic had not disappeared, but it had shifted, focused, contained. The man in front tilted his head again, studying Jake more carefully this time, eyes narrowing just slightly as recognition flickered beneath the surface. "You are making a mistake," he said calmly, his voice carrying through the rain without strain. "This is not your business." Jake let out a slow breath through his nose, the sound almost lost beneath the storm. His eyes never left the man. "It became my business the second you chased a kid into a parking lot," he replied, voice low, controlled, carrying no heat but no room for argument. The second man shifted to the side, subtly spreading out, trying to angle for a better view of Ethan behind him. Jake noticed immediately. He adjusted his stance without looking, blocking the line of sight with a slight turn of his shoulder. Small movement. Big message. Not happening. Ethan felt it too. The way Jake moved, the way he did not need to look to know where the danger was coming from. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. But it felt safe. More safe than anything had in a long time. The first man's faint smile faded. Not anger. Not yet. Just calculation. That boy saw something he should not have, he said. We're trying to fix a problem before it becomes bigger than it needs to be. Ethan's grip tightened again at those words, a quiet tremor running through him. Jake felt it like a current through his spine. His jaw set harder. Sounds like your problem already got bigger, Jake said. Silence stretched for a moment, thick and heavy. The rain filled the space between them, hissing against the pavement. Then the first man took another step forward. Closer now. Close enough for details to sharpen. Clean clothes. No panique. No hosetaschen. This was not random. This was controlled. Organized. The kind of people who expected things to go their way. You do not understand what you're stepping into, the man said, his tone shifting just slightly. Less polite now, more direct. Walk away, and none of this touches you. Jake's eyes flicked down for a fraction of a second, taking in the man's stance, the way his coat hung, the subtle outline beneath it. Then back up. Calm. Measuring. You are right, Jake said quietly. I do not understand it yet. He paused, just long enough for the words to settle. But I do understand this. His voice dropped colder now. You do not chase a scared kid in the rain unless you are hiding something worse. The second man shifted again, impatience creeping in now, tension rising under the surface. We are done talking, he muttered, taking a step forward. That was the moment everything changed. Jake moved, not fast in a frantic way, fast in a precise way. He stepped forward just enough to close the gap, placing himself directly in the path, his presence expanding, filling the space, forcing the man to stop or collide. The move was clean, controlled, final. The second man halted, caught off guard by the sudden shift. For the first time, something like uncertainty flickered across his face. Jake did not raise his voice. He did not need to. You take one more step, he said, each word deliberate, measured, and this goes somewhere you are not ready for. The threat was not loud. It was not exaggerated. That made it worse. Behind him, Ethan's breathing slowed again, his grip still tight, but steadier now, anchored by the man in front of him who had not once looked back, not once wavered. The first man studied Jake for a long moment, something deeper turning behind his eyes now. Then, slowly, he exhaled. You think you are protecting him, he said, but you're just delaying what is coming. Jake's expression did not change. Maybe, he said, or maybe you picked the wrong night to chase the wrong kid. The rain intensified, pounding harder now, as if the sky itself was leaning into the moment. No one moved. Not yet. But the line had been drawn, and everyone standing there knew it. The rain came down harder, turning the parking lot into a blur of reflections and shadows, every surface slick, every movement amplified. For a long second, no one spoke. No one moved. Then Ethan's voice broke the silence, small and shaking behind Jake's back. They were inside the building. He whispered, words stumbling over each other. I was not supposed to be there. I was just trying to find my mom's car. His fingers tightened again in the leather, grounding himself as he spoke. Jake did not turn, but his head tilted slightly, listening, every detail locking into place. What building? Jake asked quietly, his voice steady, controlled, giving the boy just enough space to speak without pushing too hard. Ethan swallowed, his throat dry despite the rain pouring over him. The office near the gas station, the one with the broken light. I heard them yelling, and then his voice cracked, cutting off as the memory caught in his chest. Jake's jaw tightened. He did not need the full sentence to understand the weight of it. In front of them, the first man's expression changed for the first time, the calm surface cracking just enough to reveal something sharper underneath. That is enough, the man said, his tone no longer patient. You should not be telling him that. Jake shifted slightly, placing himself even more firmly between them, his presence expanding like a wall locking into place. Sounds like he already did, Jake replied. The second man took another step, slower this time, more cautious, but still testing the boundary. You're out of your depth, he said, voice low. This does not end well for people who interfere. Jake let out a quiet breath, rain dripping from his brow, his eyes steady and unflinching. Funny, he said. I was just thinking the same thing about you. Ethan pressed closer now, his fear no longer wild, but concentrated, focused on the men in front of them instead of everything around him. His voice dropped to a whisper only Jake could hear. There was a man on the floor. He was not moving. The words landed heavy. Final. Jake's gaze hardened, something deeper settling into place behind his eyes. This was no longer just about a scared kid running in the rain. This was something else, something darker. The first man took a slow breath, as if weighing his options, then glanced briefly toward the vehicle behind him. A silent signal passed between him and the second man. Subtle. Practiced. Jake caught it. Of course he did. His stance shifted again, just slightly, preparing, adjusting, calculating distances without looking like he was doing anything at all. Last chance, the man said, his voice colder now, stripped of any pretense. Step aside. Jake did not move. No, the answer was simple. Solid. Unbreakable. The rain seemed to intensify again, pounding against the ground, filling the silence that followed. Then the second man moved first. Not a rush. Not reckless. A measured step forward, testing the line again. Jake reacted instantly, stepping into him, closing the space completely, forcing the man to stop short once more. The proximity changed everything. Close enough now to see the tension in his jaw, the flicker of irritation in his eyes. Jake's voice dropped even lower, almost a growl. You are not getting past me. Behind him, Ethan's breathing hitched again, but he did not try to run. Not this time. His grip stayed locked in place, holding on to the only thing that had not failed him tonight. The first man watched the exchange, his eyes narrowing, something calculating, something dangerous settling in. Then, slowly, he reached into his coat. The movement was controlled, deliberate, not rushed. That made it worse. Jake saw it immediately. Every muscle in his body tightened, focus sharpening to a razor edge. He did not step back. He did not flinch. He just shifted his weight slightly, positioning himself between that hand and the boy behind him. Careful, Jake said quietly. The word carried more weight than a shout ever could. The man's hand paused for a fraction of a second inside the coat, as if considering, as if measuring the risk. Then he stopped completely. Not fear, not hesitation. Strategy. He slowly withdrew his hand empty, letting it fall back to his side. A message in itself. This was not over. Not even close. You just made this bigger, the man said, his voice calm again, but colder than before. Jake held his gaze. It already was. Another long silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unspoken. Then, without another word, the first man turned slightly, giving a small nod to the second. They stepped back together, not retreating in defeat, but withdrawing with purpose, like men who knew the game was far from finished. The vehicle doors opened again, slow and deliberate, and the engine came back to life, headlights cutting across the rain once more. Ethan watched, barely breathing, as they climbed back inside. The car idled for a moment, then began to roll backward, tires hissing softly against the wet pavement before turning and disappearing into the night. The sound of the engine faded, leaving only the rain and the steady rumble of Jake's motorcycle behind them. For the first time since it began, the immediate danger was gone. But the air did not feel lighter. It felt heavier, like something had just begun instead of ended. Jake remained still for a moment longer, eyes fixed on the empty space where the car had been. Then, slowly, he turned his head just enough to glance down at the small hand still gripping his jacket. Ethan, he said quietly, we are not safe yet. The rain softened slightly, but the tension did not. It clung to the air, heavy and unspoken, like something waiting just beyond sight. Jake remained still for another moment, eyes scanning the edges of the lot, every shadow, every reflection in the puddles, making sure the car was truly gone and not circling back. Only when he was certain did he finally shift, his posture easing just enough to signal a change, but not enough to let his guard down. He reached back slowly, not grabbing, not pulling, just placing his hand gently over Ethan's small one where it clutched his jacket. You can let go now, he said quietly. Ethan hesitated, his fingers tightening for a split second before slowly loosening their grip. His hand dropped, but he did not step away. He stayed close, almost glued to Jake's side, eyes still scanning the darkness like it might come alive. Again at any second. "They're coming back, right?" Ethan asked, his voice small but steady, no longer breaking apart like before. Jake exhaled slowly, his breath visible in the cool night air. "Maybe," he said honestly. "Men like that do not just walk away." Ethan swallowed hard, nodding as if he already knew that. Jake turned fully now, finally facing him. Up close, the boy looked even smaller than he had in the chaos. His face pale under the streetlight, rain dripping from his hair, eyes too wide for someone his age. Fear had carved itself into him tonight. Jake crouched down again, lowering himself to Ethan's level, his movements controlled, careful, never sudden. "Listen to me," he said, voice steady, grounding. "You did the right thing. You got out. That matters." Ethan's lip trembled slightly, but he held it together this time. "I thought they were going to catch me," he admitted. Jake nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "They almost did." He did not sugarcoat it. The truth, but controlled. Then his tone shifted just slightly. Softer. But they did not. That landed differently. Ethan blinked, processing it, holding on to that one small piece of certainty. Jake glanced over his shoulder at the motorcycle, then back at the boy. The engine still idled, steady, reliable, like it had been waiting this whole time. "You got anywhere safe to go?" Jake asked. Ethan shook his head immediately. "No," he said. "My mom, she was supposed to pick me up, but she never came, and my phone died." His voice wavered again, but he pushed through it. "I went looking for a car, and that is when I heard them." Jake's jaw tightened slightly. Another missing piece falling into place. This was not random. None of it was. He stood up slowly, thinking, weighing options, already mapping out the next move in his head. Staying here was not one of them. Not even close. He stepped toward the bike, then paused, looking back at Ethan. The boy had not moved. Just stood there, watching him, uncertainty flickering again, that fragile sense of safety threatening to crack. Jake saw it immediately. He sighed softly, then walked back the 2 steps he had taken away, closing the distance again. "Hey," he said, crouching slightly once more, meeting the boy's eyes. "You trust me enough to get on that bike?" Ethan hesitated. Of course he did. His eyes flicked to the motorcycle, then back to Jake, fear and doubt battling with something new. Something growing. "I have never been on one," he admitted. Jake nodded. "That is fine," he said. "You just hold on. I will take care of the rest." Silence hung between them for a moment. Then Ethan gave a small nod. Not confident, not certain, but enough. Jake stood, walked to the bike, and swung his leg over it with practiced ease. He reached back, offering his hand, palm open, steady. "Come on," he said. Ethan stepped forward slowly, each step deliberate, like he was crossing an invisible line he could not uncross. He took Jake's hand. Small, cold, shaking. Jake's grip was firm but gentle as he helped him up onto the seat behind him. "Wrap your arms around me," Jake instructed. "Tight." Ethan did, hesitantly at first, then tighter as the reality of the moment settled in. Jake reached back, adjusting his grip slightly to make sure he was secure. "Do not let go," he said. "No matter what." Ethan nodded against his back. Jake rolled his shoulders once, eyes scanning the lot one last time. Empty. For now. He twisted the throttle slightly, the engine responding with a deeper growl. "All right, kid," Jake muttered under his breath. "Let us get you somewhere they cannot find you." The motorcycle surged forward, tires cutting through the water as they pulled out of the parking lot and into the dark, rain-soaked streets beyond. Behind them, the silence they left behind felt temporary, like something was already moving to fill it. And ahead of them, whatever safety Jake was heading toward was about to become something else entirely. The motorcycle cut through the rain-soaked streets like a blade, engine roaring low and steady beneath them as Jake leaned into each turn with practiced precision. Water sprayed out from under the tires, streetlights streaking past in blurred lines of gold and white, the city reduced to shadows and motion. Ethan clung tightly to Jake's jacket, his small arms wrapped around him, fingers gripping as if letting go meant everything would fall apart again. His face pressed against the cold leather, eyes squeezed shut every time the bike accelerated, every time the wind rushed harder against him. He had never moved this fast before, never trusted something this unknown, but the steady presence in front of him grounded him in a way he did not understand. Jake felt it, the grip, the fear, the trust that had been handed to him without permission. It settled heavy in his chest, stirring something he had spent years trying to bury. He pushed it down, focusing on the road, scanning every intersection, every passing car, every reflection in the mirrors. They were not being followed. Not yet. That did not mean anything. Men like that did not rush. They circled. They waited. They planned. Jake took a sharp turn off the main road, cutting into a narrower street lined with old brick buildings and dim storefronts. The lights here were fewer, the shadows deeper. He slowed slightly, not because he needed to, but because this part required more attention. Less visibility meant more risk. Ethan shifted slightly behind him, his voice barely audible over the engine. "Where are we going?" Jake did not answer right away. He did not like saying locations out loud, even when no one else was around. Old habits. Survival habits. Instead, he spoke after a moment, voice low. Somewhere off their map. Ethan did not fully understand that, but he nodded anyway, tightening his grip again as the bike rolled deeper into the quieter part of town. The streets grew emptier, the buildings more worn down, fewer signs of life behind the dark windows. Finally, Jake slowed to a near stop in front of a narrow alley tucked between two aging warehouses. He checked the mirrors again. Nothing. No headlights. No movement. He turned into the alley without hesitation. The bike moved slowly now, tires crunching lightly over gravel as they passed rusted dumpsters and stacks of old wooden pallets. At the far end stood a metal door, worn and scratched, barely visible in the dim light from a single flickering bulb overhead. Jake killed the engine. The sudden silence rang in Ethan's ears, the roar replaced by the distant sound of rain tapping against metal and concrete. "Stay on," Jake said quietly as he swung off the bike. Ethan did not argue. He stayed exactly where he was, arms still wrapped around where Jake had been, as if the warmth might still be there. Jake walked to the door, reaching into his jacket for a key. His movements were quick but controlled, eyes flicking once more toward the alley entrance before sliding the key into the lock. It clicked open with a dull sound that seemed louder than it should have been. He pushed the door open and stepped inside, immediately reaching for a switch on the wall. A low hum filled the space as a row of overhead lights flickered on, revealing a small but organized garage. Tools lined the walls in neat rows, workbenches clean, every item in its place. The smell of oil and metal filled the air, familiar and grounding. Jake stepped back outside, nodding toward Ethan. "Come on," he said. Ethan carefully slid off the bike, his legs unsteady as they hit the ground, the adrenaline finally beginning to wear off. Jake steadied him with a light hand on his shoulder, guiding him inside without pressure. The moment Ethan crossed the threshold, something shifted. The outside world, with its rain and shadows and danger, felt just a little further away. Jake closed the door behind them and locked it, the sound final. He turned back to Ethan, studying him for a moment, taking in the soaked clothes, the shaking hands, the exhaustion written all over his face. Without a word, Jake grabbed a clean towel from a shelf and handed it to him. "Dry off," he said. Ethan took it slowly, nodding as he wiped his face, his movements small and careful. Jake moved to a cabinet, pulling out a bottle of water and handing it over next. Ethan drank quickly, like he had forgotten what it felt like to stop moving, to stop running. Jake leaned back against the workbench, arms crossing loosely, watching him. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but heavy with everything that still needed to be said. Finally, Jake spoke. "Start from the beginning," he said quietly. "Everything you saw." Ethan froze slightly, the towel still in his hands, his eyes lowering as the memory rushed back in. His voice came out small, but clearer than before. "They were arguing about money and something about a file. He swallowed hard. Then one of them, he pushed the other man, and he hit the ground, and he did not get back up. Jake's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes sharpened. The storm had not ended. It had only moved inside. The garage fell into a quiet that felt heavier than the storm outside, the hum of the overhead lights mixing with the faint tapping of rain against the metal roof. Ethan stood near the workbench, the towel hanging loosely in his hands now, his eyes fixed on the floor as if the memory he had just spoken out loud was still playing there in front of him. Jake did not rush him. He had learned a long time ago that pushing someone through fear only made them shut down. Instead, he stayed where he was, leaning back slightly, giving the boy space while keeping his presence steady and close enough to hold the room together. "What about the file?" Jake asked after a moment, his voice calm, measured, like they were talking about something ordinary instead of something that could get them both hurt. Ethan blinked, pulling himself back into the present. "I did not see it clearly," he said, shaking his head. "They kept saying it was missing, that someone took it, and one of them kept yelling that it was not supposed to leave the building." His hands tightened around the towel again. Then they started arguing about who was going to fix it. Jake's eyes narrowed slightly. Missing file. Not supposed to leave. Someone taken out of the picture. It was starting to form a shape, and none of it was small. "Did they see you?" Jake asked. Ethan hesitated again, his breathing picking up just a little. "I did not think so at first," he said. "I was hiding behind a door, but then I knocked something over when I tried to leave." His voice dropped to a whisper. "That is when they started looking for me." Jake nodded once, the timeline clicking into place. That explained the chase. That explained the calm confidence. They were not guessing. They knew a witness got away, and now that witness was standing in his garage. Jake pushed himself off the workbench and began moving around the space, not pacing, but working. He grabbed a clean sweatshirt from a cabinet and handed it to Ethan. "Change out of those wet clothes," he said. "You're going to freeze if you stay like that." Ethan nodded and took the sweatshirt, stepping behind a stack of shelves for a moment of privacy. Jake turned his attention to the rest of the room, checking the locks again, glancing at a small monitor near the corner that showed a grainy view of the alley outside. Empty. For now. But he did not trust empty. Not tonight. Ethan stepped back a moment later, the oversized sweatshirt hanging loosely on him, sleeves covering half his hands. He looked even smaller now, but less fragile. Less like he might fall apart at any second. Jake nodded once in approval. "Better," he said. He grabbed a chair and set it near the workbench, gesturing for Ethan to sit. The boy lowered himself into it slowly, still watching Jake like he might disappear if he looked away too long. "You said something about your mom," Jake said, his tone shifting slightly, more careful now. "She was supposed to pick you up." Ethan's expression changed immediately, the fear giving way to something deeper. "Worry." "Yeah," he said quietly. "She always comes, she is never late, but tonight she did not show up." He looked down at his hands. "I waited for a long time. Then I got scared, so I went to look for her car." Jake felt that one settle in his chest. This was bigger than just the boy. "What kind of car does she drive?" Jake asked. "A blue sedan," Ethan answered quickly. "Older, kind of scratched on the side." Jake nodded slowly, filing it away. "Missing mother. Wrong place. Wrong time. Or maybe not wrong at all. Maybe connected." He crouched down again, bringing himself to Ethan's level, his voice steady but serious. "Ethan," he said, "I need you to think carefully. Did you see your mom anywhere near that building?" Ethan's face tightened as he searched his memory. Seconds passed. Then he shook his head. "No," he said. "But I saw a car that looked like hers parked across the street." Jake's eyes sharpened. That was not coincidence. Not anymore. A quiet tension filled the space again, heavier than before, stretching between what they knew and what they were starting to realize. Jake stood slowly, running a hand over his beard, his mind already moving ahead, connecting pieces, building a path forward whether he liked it or not. He looked down at Ethan, who was watching him with a mix of fear and something else now. Expectation. "All right," Jake said finally, his voice low, resolved. "This is not just about you anymore." Ethan swallowed. "What does that mean?" Jake met his eyes, steady, unflinching. "It means," he said, We are going to find your mom. Outside, the rain continued to fall, steady and unrelenting, as if it knew the night was far from over. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning, heavier with consequence. We're going to find your mom. Ethan stared at Jake, his eyes widening slightly, hope flickering there for the first time, fragile but real. You mean that? He asked, his voice quiet but steady. Jake did not hesitate. Yeah, he said. Edo. That was all it took. Something shifted in the boy's posture, just enough to matter. The fear was still there, the exhaustion, the confusion, but now there was direction. Jake turned away, moving with purpose now, the slow, careful stillness from before replaced by action. He walked over to a small desk in the corner of the garage, pulling open a drawer and retrieving an old city map, worn at the folds but still usable. He spread it across the surface, weighing the corners down with a wrench and a small metal part. Come here, he said. Ethan slid off the chair and walked over, his steps hesitant but curious, drawn in despite everything. Jake pointed to a section of the map. Show me where you were, he said. Ethan leaned closer, scanning the paper, his brow furrowing as he tried to orient himself. After a moment, he pointed with a slightly shaking finger. Here, he said, near this gas station. Jake nodded, marking it mentally. Then he traced a path with his finger. And you said you saw a car that looked like your mom's across the street? Ethan nodded quickly. Yes. Jake leaned back slightly, his mind working through the possibilities. If the car was there, and she was supposed to meet him, then she had made it to the area, that meant something had happened between arrival and now. Something connected to what Ethan saw. Jake's jaw tightened. This was not random. Not at all. He reached for a small radio, sitting on the desk, hesitating for a fraction of a second before turning it on. Static filled the room briefly before settling into a low murmur of local chatter. He adjusted the dial, listening carefully, scanning for anything out of place. After a moment, a voice cut through, faint but clear enough. Report of disturbance near Jefferson and 3rd. Officers responded earlier, but no. Active scene found. Jake's eyes narrowed. That was close. Too close. Ethan looked up at him. What does that mean? Jake exhaled slowly. It means someone cleaned up fast, he said. Too fast. He turned the radio down, the low static returning to the background. The pieces were starting to move, but they were not lining up in a way he liked. Not yet. Jake walked back toward Ethan, crouching slightly, so they were eye level again. I need you to stay here, he said, his tone firm but calm. No matter what you hear, no matter what you think, you stay inside this garage. You understand me? Ethan's face tightened immediately. You are leaving? Jake held his gaze. Just for a little while, he said. I need to check something. Ethan shook his head quickly, fear rising again. No, you cannot. What if they come back? His voice cracked, the earlier confidence slipping. Jake reached out this time, placing a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. Not heavy, just enough. They are not coming here, he said. Not tonight. Ethan searched his face, trying to find certainty there, trying to hold on to it. How do you know? Jake paused for a moment, then gave a small, almost grim smile. Because if they do, he said quietly, they are walking into my world. That landed differently. Not comfort exactly. Something stronger. Ethan swallowed, nodding slowly, though his hand still trembled slightly at his sides. Jake stood, moving back toward the workbench, grabbing a jacket and checking the contents of his pockets with quick, practiced motions. He paused briefly, then reached into a cabinet and pulled out an old phone, setting on the table in front of Ethan. If anything feels wrong, he said, you call 911. You tell them exactly where you are. Ethan nodded again, more firmly this time, holding on to the instructions like they were something solid in a night that had been anything but. Jake walked to the door, stopping with his hand on the handle. For a second, he did not move. Then he looked back over his shoulder. Ethan was standing exactly where he left him, small in the middle of the garage, but no longer alone. Jake gave a short nod, then opened the door and stepped out into the rain once more, the darkness swallowing him almost immediately. Inside, Ethan stood still, listening as the sound of the rain grew louder again, the silence stretching around him. Somewhere out there, something had gone very wrong, and the only person who seemed to know how to face it had just walked back into it. The door closed behind Jake with a dull, final sound, leaving Ethan alone in the garage as the rain continued to fall outside, steady and unrelenting. For a moment, Ethan did not move. He just stood there, listening, the silence pressing in around him in a way that felt almost louder than the storm. The hum of the overhead lights filled the space, constant and low, but it did little to quiet the thoughts racing through his mind. He looked toward the door, half expecting it to open again, half afraid that it might. But it stayed shut. Jake was gone. Ethan swallowed hard and slowly stepped back toward the workbench, his fingers brushing against the edge as if he needed something solid to hold on to. His eyes drifted to the old phone Jake had left for him. It sat there, simple, silent, but important. A lifeline. He reached out, hesitated, then picked it up, turning it over in his hands. 911, Jake had said, if anything felt wrong. Ethan exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself. Nothing felt right, but that did not mean he should panic. Not yet. He set the phone back down carefully, as if placing it too hard might break whatever fragile safety still existed inside these walls. The rain tapped against the metal roof, creating a rhythm that should have been calming, but instead it only reminded him of how alone he was. His eyes moved around the garage, taking in the tools, the shelves, the closed door. Everything felt organized, controlled, like a place where things made sense. Unlike the night outside, unlike what he had seen, his chest tightened again at the memory. The voices, the argument, the man falling and not getting back up. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, shaking his head slightly as if he could push it away. Do not think about it, he whispered to himself. Just wait. Minutes passed, or maybe it was longer. Time felt strange now, stretched and uneven. Ethan moved slowly toward the small monitor in the corner, the one Jake had checked earlier. He stood on his toes. To see it better, his small frame barely reaching the edge of the screen. The grainy image showed the alley outside. Empty. Vet. Still. He stared at it, watching for any movement, any sign that something was coming. For a while, there was nothing. Then something shifted. A shadow moved across the far end of the alley, barely visible, gone as quickly as it appeared. Ethan froze. His breath caught in his throat as his eyes locked onto the screen. No, he whispered under his breath. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe just a trick of the light, the rain, his imagination. But then it happened again. A shape. A movement. Closer this time. His heart began to pound. Fast and loud. The sound filling his ears. He stepped back from the monitor, his instincts screaming at him even as he tried to stay calm. The door. The lock. Jake had locked it. It was safe. It had to be safe. A faint sound echoed from outside. Soft. Almost nothing. But it was there. Ethan turned slowly toward the door, his entire body tense, every muscle ready to run, even though there was nowhere to go. The sound came again. A light scrape, like something brushing against metal. Ethan's eyes widened as fear surged back, stronger than before, because now there was no one standing between him and whatever was out there. His gaze snapped to the phone on the table. 911. His hand trembled as he took a step toward it. Another sound. Closer now. Right outside. Ethan grabbed the phone, his fingers shaking as he held it, staring at it like it might disappear if he blinked. His breathing came fast, uneven, but he forced himself to remember Jake's words. Stay inside. Call if something feels wrong. This felt wrong. This felt very wrong. He moved backward, putting distance between himself and the door, his eyes never leaving it. The handle did not move. Not yet. But the presence on the other side was undeniable now. Heavy. Waiting. Ethan's voice came out in a whisper, barely audible even to himself. Jake. Outside. The rain continued to fall, masking the world beyond the thin barrier of metal. Inside, a small boy stood alone, holding on to the only instructions he had been given, while something on the other side of the door decided what to do next. The sound came again, sharper this time, a slow drag against the metal door that sent a chill straight through Ethan's chest. He froze where he stood, The phone clutched tightly in his trembling hands, his breath shallow and uneven. Every instinct told him to run, but there was nowhere to go. The garage suddenly felt too small, the walls too thin, the air too heavy. His eyes stayed locked on the door as the handle twitched slightly, just enough to make his heart slam harder against his ribs. "No," he whispered, shaking his head as if denial could stop whatever was happening. He fumbled with the phone, his fingers clumsy as he tried to press the numbers Jake had told him. 911. The screen lit up faintly in his hand, the soft glow illuminating his pale face as the call began to connect. The ringing sounded impossibly loud in the silence, each tone stretching longer than the last. Outside, the scraping stopped. That was worse. The sudden absence of sound felt deliberate, like whatever was out there had decided to listen instead of move. Ethan held his breath without realizing it, his body going completely still as if even the smallest movement might give him away. Then a voice came through the phone, calm and distant. 911. What is your emergency? Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came out at first. His throat felt tight, his voice trapped somewhere between fear and urgency. He stammered, forcing himself to speak. Someone is outside, they're trying to get in. The operator's voice remained steady, grounding. All right, I need you to stay calm. Are you in a safe place right now? Ethan glanced at the door again. The handle was still. The silence held. I think so, he said, though he was not sure if he believed it. Before the operator could respond again, a sudden, solid knock hit the door from the outside. Loud, deliberate. Ethan flinched so hard he almost dropped the phone. The sound echoed through the garage, bouncing off the walls, filling every corner. Then another knock. Slower this time. Controlled. Not frantic. Not desperate. That made it worse. Ethan backed away instinctively, his voice rising. They are here. They are right outside. The operator's tone sharpened slightly, more focused. Units are being dispatched. Stay on the line with me. Do not open that door. Ethan nodded, even though she could not see him. I will not, he said quickly, his eyes wide, locked on the door like it might burst open at any second. Then the knocking stopped again. Silence returned, thicker than before. And then a voice came from the other side. Lo, familiar. Kid, it is me. Open the door. Ethan froze. His heart skipped, then pounded even harder. That voice. It sounded like Jake. Almost exactly like Jake. Relief surged up for a split second, instinctive and powerful. But something fell off. Too soon. Too wrong. Jake had just left. There was no way he could be back already. Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. Jake, he called out hesitantly, his voice shaking. No, answer for a moment. Then the voice came again, a little firmer this time. Yeah, kid. Open up. Ethan took a step toward the door before stopping himself. Jake's words echoed in his mind. Stay inside. Do not open the door. No matter what. His breathing quickened again as doubt cut through the brief relief. He shook his head slowly, backing away. No, he said under his breath. No, that is not right. The operator's voice came through the phone again, sharper now. Who is that? Do you know them? Ethan swallowed hard. They sound like the man who helped me, he said, his voice trembling. But he just left. He cannot be back. A pause. Then the operator spoke carefully. Do not open that door. Stay where you are. Help is on the way. Outside, the voice shifted slightly, losing that perfect calm imitation. Kid, do not make this harder than it needs to be, it said, the tone colder now, less convincing. The illusion cracked. Ethan's eyes widened as fear surged back, stronger than before. He backed up another step, clutching the phone like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. That is not him, he whispered. That is not Jake. The door remained closed, the lock holding firm, but whatever stood on the other side had just shown its hand. And now Ethan knew for certain. They had found him. The words hung in the air like a crack in something fragile, and once broken, it could not be repaired. That is not Jake. Ethan's voice trembled, but there was something new beneath it now. Awareness. The kind that comes when fear sharpens into instinct. On the other side of the door, silence followed for a brief moment, as if the man out there had not expected resistance. Then a low chuckle slipped through the metal, cold and patient. "Smart kid," the voice said, no longer trying to sound like anyone else. "But smart is not going to save you." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone, his knuckles turning pale as he backed further into the garage, putting more distance between himself and the door. "They're still here," he whispered into the phone, his voice shaking but clearer now. "They're trying to trick me." The operator responded immediately, her tone steady but urgent. "You're doing exactly right. Stay away from the door. Officers are close. Just keep talking to me." Ethan nodded again, even though she could not see him. His breathing came in sharp bursts, but he forced himself to stay focused, to keep his eyes open, to keep thinking. Outside, a new sound broke through the rain. Not knocking this time. A metallic clink. Then another, like something being tested. Ethan's stomach dropped. "What are they doing?" he whispered. He did not have to wait long for an answer. A sudden, heavy impact hit the door, loud and violent, the metal rattling in its frame. Ethan cried out, stumbling backward, the phone nearly slipping from his hand. Another hit followed. Harder this time. The lock held, but the sound echoed through the entire garage, shaking everything inside it. "They're trying to break it," Ethan said, panic rising again despite his effort to hold it back. The operator's voice cut through firm. "Listen to me. Is there anywhere you can hide inside? Somewhere away from the door?" Ethan spun around, his eyes scanning the garage rapidly. Shelves, workbenches, tools. Then he saw it. A small storage space behind a row of stacked crates, partially hidden from view. "Yes," he said quickly. "There's a place. Go there now," the operator instructed. "Stay low and stay quiet." Ethan did not hesitate this time. He ran, his small feet moving fast across the concrete floor as another heavy blow slammed into the door behind him. The sound was louder now, closer to breaking. He ducked behind the crates, crouching low, pulling his knees in tight as he tried to make himself as small as possible. His breathing was loud in his ears, but he pressed a hand over his mouth, trying to quiet it. Outside, the impacts continued. Slow, methodical, not rushed. Whoever was out there knew exactly what they were doing. Each strike was placed deliberate, testing the weak points. The metal groaned under the pressure. "They are not stopping," Ethan whispered into the phone, tears slipping down his face again, though he did not sob this time. He was past that, past panic. This was something else, something colder. The operator's voice remained steady, but there was urgency beneath it now. "Stay where you are. Do not move. Help is almost there. Almost." The word echoed in Ethan's mind as another impact hit the door, louder than the last. The frame shifted slightly this time, just enough to notice, just enough to make it worse. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut for a second, then forced them open again. He could not hide from it. Not now. Not when it was this close. Somewhere in the distance, faint but real, a new sound began to rise. Sirens. Far away, but getting closer. Ethan's head lifted slightly, his eyes widening as he listened. Hope flickered again, fragile but there. Outside, the impacts paused, just for a moment, as if whoever was out there heard it too. Then a voice, quieter now, more controlled. "Time is running out, kid," it said through the door. Ethan did not respond. He stayed exactly where he was, hidden, silent, clutching the phone like it was the only thing holding him together. The sirens grew louder, cutting through the rain, closing the distance. Inside the garage, a small boy held his ground. Outside, the men who had chased him began to run out of time. And somewhere between those two moments, everything was about to change. The sirens grew louder, cutting through the rain like a warning slicing across the night, rising from distant echoes into something immediate and real. Ethan stayed crouched behind the crates, his body tight, his breathing controlled but shallow as he listened. Outside the door, the silence stretched again, heavier this time, filled with calculation. The men had stopped hitting the door. That alone made Ethan's heart race faster. They were thinking now, adjusting, waiting. A low voice came again from the other side, quieter, closer to the metal, as if the speaker had leaned in. "You think they're going to save you?" the man said, almost calmly. You think they are fast enough? Ethan did not answer. He pressed the phone closer to his ear, his fingers trembling but holding firm. The operator's voice was still there, steady, grounding. Stay with me, she said. You're doing great. Officers are almost there. Almost. The word repeated again, but this time it carried more weight. The sirens are no longer far away. They were close enough to feel. Close enough that whoever was outside could hear them clearly now. A new sound followed. Footsteps. Quick, moving away from the door. Ethan's eyes widened slightly, hope flickering again as he listened. The footsteps faded into the rain, blending with the storm, disappearing into the night. For a moment, nothing happened. Then everything did at once. Tires screeched somewhere nearby. Doors slammed. Voices shouted, distant but urgent. The sirens cut off abruptly, replaced by sharp commands echoing through the alley. Ethan did not move. He stayed exactly where he was, his body still locked in place, his mind trying to catch up with the sudden shift. Police are on scene, the operator said. Stay where you are until they come to you. Ethan nodded, even though she could not see him, his grip on the phone finally loosening just slightly. Outside, the sounds grew louder. Heavy boots on wet ground. Radios crackling. Someone shouting directions. Then a knock came at the door. Different this time. Firm but controlled. Police department. A voice called out clearly. If anyone is inside, respond. Ethan froze for a split second, doubt flashing again. Then he forced himself to move. Slowly, carefully, he stepped out from behind the crates, his legs shaky but holding. He walked toward the door, each step deliberate, his eyes locked on the handle. I am here, he called out, his voice small but steady. I am inside. A pause. Then the sound of keys. The lock turned, metal shifting, the door opening inward as two officers stepped inside, their uniforms dark against the light behind them. One of them crouched immediately, his voice calm, reassuring. Hey there, kid. You're safe now. Safe. The word felt strange, almost unreal, but it settled into Ethan's chest in a way that nothing else had all night. He nodded slowly, lowering the phone from his ear as the operator's voice faded away. He told me not to open the door, Ethan said quietly, his eyes searching the room, as if expecting Jake to step back in at any moment. You did the right thing, the officer said, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. You did everything right. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but the storm felt different now. Not gone, not over, just shifted. The officers moved through the garage, checking the space, securing it, their voices low and controlled as they spoke into their radios. Ethan stood still in the middle of it, the adrenaline finally beginning to drain from his body, leaving behind exhaustion and something else. A quiet realization. Jake had been right. About everything. And just as that thought settled in, another voice came from the alley. Not shouting, not urgent, just a low, familiar tone cutting through the noise. Kid still in there? Ethan's head snapped toward the door, his eyes widening as recognition hit instantly. The officers turned as well, stepping aside slightly as a large figure moved into the doorway, rain dripping from his jacket, his presence filling the space without effort. Jake Razor. Morrison stood there, eyes scanning the room once, then landing on Ethan. For a brief second, the tension in his posture eased. Just a fraction. Enough to matter. Ethan took a step forward, his voice barely above a whisper. You came back. Jake nodded once, slow and steady. Told you, he said quietly. I have got you. And this time, there was no doubt in it at all. The rain had begun to ease, falling now in a softer rhythm against the roof of the garage as the tension of the night slowly unraveled into something quieter, something real. Ethan stood a few feet from Jake, his small frame still wrapped in the oversized sweatshirt, his eyes locked onto the man who had stepped back into the room like he had never truly left. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They did not need to. Everything that had happened between them was already there, understood without words. One of the officers approached, his voice calm but firm as he addressed Jake. We're going to need a statement, he said. Jake gave a short nod, his gaze never leaving Ethan. You will get it, he replied quietly. Then, finally, he stepped forward, closing the distance, his movements slower now, no longer sharp with tension, but grounded, deliberate. He crouched down in front of Ethan, bringing himself to eye level once more. "You did good," Jake said, his voice low and steady. "You listened. That is why you are still here." Ethan swallowed, his eyes shining, not with panic this time, but with something deeper. Relief. "I almost opened the door," he admitted softly. Jake nodded. "But you did not," he said. "That is what matters." The words settled into the boy, anchoring him in a way that nothing else had all night. Behind them, the officers moved through the garage, finishing their sweep, their radios crackling with update from outside. One of them stepped back in, speaking to his partner. "They found a vehicle matching the description a few blocks out," he said. "Abandoned. No sign of the suspects." Jake's jaw tightened slightly, but he did not react beyond that. He had expected as much. Men like that did not stay to get caught. But they had been stopped. For tonight, that was enough. Another officer approached Ethan, kneeling beside him with a gentler expression. "We found a woman nearby," he said carefully. "She is shaken, but she is safe. She matches the description you gave for your mom." Ethan's breath caught. "My mom," he said, his voice breaking slightly as hope surged through him again. The officer nodded. "She is asking for you." That was all it took. Ethan stepped forward instinctively, but then hesitated, glancing back at Jake for just a second. Permission. Reassurance. Jake gave a small nod. "Go on," he said quietly. Ethan did not wait after that. He moved quickly toward the door, guided by the officer, his steps faster now, driven by something stronger than fear. As he reached the doorway, he stopped for a brief second and turned back. "Are you coming?" he asked. Jake paused, then gave a faint, almost reluctant smile. "I will be right behind you," he said. Ethan nodded and disappeared into the night beyond, the sound of his footsteps fading into the softer rain. Jake stood there for a moment longer, watching the empty doorway, something heavy and familiar settling in his chest. Not regret. Not this time. Something quieter. Something closer to peace. He straightened slowly, turning toward the officers as they approached again, ready to take his statement, ready to do what came next. But his eyes drifted once more toward the open door, toward the night that had brought the boy into his path. A path he had not planned. A fight he had not chosen. And yet, one he had stepped into without hesitation. Outside, under the dim glow of street lights and the fading rain, Ethan ran into his mother's arms, her voice breaking as she held him tight, the fear of the night finally giving way to relief. And from a distance, just before the door closed behind him, Jake saw it. The moment that made everything worth it. He exhaled slowly, then stepped forward, leaving the shadows of the garage behind. The storm had passed, but something had changed. For both of them. And this time, it was not something broken. It was something found.